Welcome to the Window to China Cable TV. I'm the host, Xin Yuzhang. I'm so honored to have Professor Amita Axioni on the show today. George Washington University Professor Axioni is also the author of 24 books, including the most recently his new book, The New Normal, Finding the Balance Between the Individual Rights and the Common Good. Could you tell us more about yourself? I mean, it means a lot to us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here and looking forward to talk about China. But to talk a little about myself, well, I was born in Germany, but I'm Jewish, so the Nazis didn't like the idea of having me there. So when I was 6 years old, my parents took me to what was called Palestine in those days. I should say we didn't have much choices. Most countries wouldn't take any more Jewish refugees. And in fact, the United States sent a ship full of Jewish refugees back to the Nazis. The State Department said, well, we could take 20,000 Jews out of 6 million, but we take old ones because they don't multiply. So it gave you a sense of the atmosphere. And so I moved with my parents to the Middle East. Until in 1947, I was in high school. Israel was founded. And a famous story, the 7 Arab armies attacked the one-day-old state, and I went to fight. And you see in a moment there is a great relevance to my work with China, because I was in combat for 2.5 years. My first book is called A Diary of a Commando Soldier, but I hated every minute of it. A lot of my friends were killed, others were wounded. We killed a lot of other people. And I left the war with a sense that we should do everything possible, go the extra mile to avoid wars. And so when I then came to the United States, I became very active, first in the movement against the war in Vietnam. Actually, my first article about it appeared in the Washington Post in 1964, which is quite early in the protest movement. And then I became even more active in the movement against nuclear weapons. I demonstrated and such. I've written 2 books about it. So that stayed with me. So recently, when I started reading about people criticizing China violently, and people in China criticizing the United States in very aggressive terms, I became very concerned about that. And I got together with a group of Chinese and American, and we've been meeting and trying to find ways to prevent our 2 nations from going to war or even thinking about it. And the good news is that if you think about it, and I'm sure we have a chance to talk about it, there are really no serious differences between China and the United States. This is not like we both want, I don't know, India or whatever.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of overlapping interests, concerned with nuclear weapons, concerned with terrorism, climate, pollution. So there really is here, they're particularly sad if both countries need money for their domestic growth, if that would be spent, as at the moment both do, on ever more weapons.
Yeah, I agree with you. You went to the war. You know this war is a disaster for citizens. Every people don't need it at all. So in China, same thing. My parents went through all the civilian wars in China, the anti-Japanese wars in China. So they tell the story. We just feel it's this tragedy. People just, when they are in the fire and the water, they know where to go. They just running, no direction at all. I mean, it's no war to me. I mean, I'm so glad that you promoting these activities to make exchange between the China and the U.S. So it seems you have the experience to battle in the war. So I just want you tell us what's going on in the Middle East now. Why has it become difficult? That means ISIS becomes very terrible for people.
Well, it's really a particularly tragic situation. It was bad enough when people of different faith were killing each other, because again, why not allow people, as we do in the United States, each to pray to their own God or not pray at all? I don't see any harm come to that. But when people become that fanatic and kill people just because they're Christian or because they're Kurds or such, I think it's horrible enough. But then we get this additional, almost unbelievable tragedy that Muslims kill each other because they're not the right kind of Muslim. Sunni kill Shia and Shia kill Sunni. And so now comes this group, which is even more violent, more brutal, and has a particular appeal because many people in the Middle East feel very humiliated. If you are the son of a farmer in Egypt who lives on $1 or less a day, 50% likely you don't have a job, and you watch television and you see all these affluent people, you cannot but feel left out and humiliated. There are a lot of young people in the Middle East. And it's very productive in terms of childbirth. So, and most of these people have no future. And so come this ISIS now and gives them honor because it promises them to reestablish the caliphate, the most glorious moment in the history of Islam, a state which has world power, world influence. And they're not just talking about it, because unlike the other groups who just commit terror and run, when they grab land, they start governing in line with what they believe in. So if you are a young Muslim in Chechnya, whatever, and you hear and see that, it has a great appeal to you. But at the end of the day, you have just thousands of civilians killing each other, one group against all the others, and it's now for years and years, and inside, and they go to all those extremes. I mean, they burned the Jordanian pilot. I mean, we haven't heard about this thing since the Middle Ages, you know. I mean, they bury people alive, and they put bulldozers and land on them. They crucify people. So I think that particular group, we really need to show that we cannot tolerate such extreme inhumanity.
What about Israel and Palestine's relations? I mean, the former President Carter said a two-state solution is dead. So what do you think is two-state solution? Is it possible going on to help with that?
It's kind of interesting. If you go back, earlier mentioned 1947, when Israel was founded. At that time, the United Nations offered the Jews and the Arabs a map. And the map was going to take the area we're talking about and divide it into two areas. One was going to be for Israel, one for Palestinian state. And if you look at that map now, you see it's very close to where we are now and where we're going to end up. Basically, Israel had what the United Nations was offering 47, and the Palestinians more or less occupy the other. All that killing, all that suffering, all the billions of dollars based on all this tension, it was all wasted. So where we're going to end up, everybody in the Middle East knows we're going to end up with two states and such. The trouble is at the moment, you see, it's one thing to talk about solutions, but they have to get from here to there. And there are very serious difficulties. For a moment, to speak about the Palestinians, okay? First of all, they didn't have an election for many years. So the question is, if you make an agreement with the head of the Palestinians, who are you agreeing with? He may not be there tomorrow. He cannot speak for his people. Second, he has a commitment to allow 4 million Palestinian refugees to return, and they all want to go back to what is now Israel. Now, if you're in his shoes, you understand, right? His people say, we've been sitting in refugee camps in Jordan, in Syria, and in Lebanon for 50 years, waiting for be able to go back to our homes. You cannot give this up. On the other hand, you look at it from Israel and say 4 million Palestinians going to come back to Tel Aviv. So there are some very serious difficulties there, which stand in the way, which is a completely sensible, essential solution. So I'm all in favor of a two-state solution. The question is how to get from here to there.
So it's now with the Middle East situation in chaos. Is it? Anyway, does the Iran nuclear deal have impact on that situation?
Well, I think most everybody agree, whether they're for or against the deal, is that there are other problems with Iran which have nothing to do with the nuclear problem. So, for instance, they provided 100,000 missiles to Hezbollah, which all pointed at Israel. They provided all kind of other weapons, financial support. They are supporting some of the tribes in Yemen, which fight the Saudis. They've tried to overthrow the governments in some of the Emirates. So Iran has an image of itself as a rising power, not without reason. It has much greater influence in Iraq today than we have. Its militia, were the only one so far been successful, they're the Kurds against ISIS. So the question is, forget for a moment about the nuclear deal, what the West is going to do about Iran's attempt to take over the whole Middle East. Again, to repeat, it has more influence in Lebanon, has more influence in Syria, it has growing influence in Yemen than the West, and in Iraq.
That's a very good question. We have to think about. So we're going to have a break. So we will be right back in 2 minutes. Thank you for having you. You are really famous for the studies in your field. Academic studies is really important for us. Thank you so much.
Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
Welcome back to the Window to China Cable TV. Again, I have Professor Amitabh Soni is with me on Channel 10. So let's talk about your new book, The New Normal. You suggest the society must balance individual rights and the common good. How do we balance this?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you mentioning my new book, The New Normal. We have a tendency in the United States to copy a formula which exists in our courts. Our courts are built on the following idea, that 2 sides will come and each will give the most extreme possible version of the case. So for instance, the state will come and say that this person is the most terrible person ever born. He throws stones at cats. He never sent a birthday card to his mother. He's a horrible person. And the defense will say, he's the sweetest guy alive. He kisses little children. He plants flowers and such. And each one represents the most extreme possible version of the case. And the jury is supposed to decide what is true on the basis of two extreme stories. And I want to emphasize, the jury is not allowed to ask any questions. The judge is not allowed to ask any questions. All you have is this two extreme presentation. Now we copy this now in public life. So we have the Republicans come and say, the government is terrible, it does all these awful things, it wastes the money, it occupies, it spies on you and such. And the Democrats say, it's Wall Street is exploiting people because of inequality, and so each one takes the most extreme possible position. And instead of anything arising out of this, we get a polarization, a freeze, and most of the nation business simply doesn't get done. So our position starts with the notion that we should admit from the beginning that we have more than one commitment. So on the one hand, we do need to worry about our security. There are hundreds of Westerns who fight with ISIS, who can come to the United States without a visa, because they come from countries like Britain, who have free entry to the United States. So we do have to worry about terrorism. I mean, we had some very bad experiences, and recently there were terrorist attacks in London, in Spain, in France. It would be ridiculous to assume that we're going to be immune forever, okay? On the other hand, we obviously have, our rights are very important. It's what we're all about. So instead of saying, one side, the government will argue for security, and ACLU will argue for liberty, and they're going to see who can be more extreme, we take the position that we, from the beginning, not to recognize that we have two conflicting needs. Both have to be served. Okay, now once you start that way, then you suddenly can see all kind of reasonable intermediary position. So for instance, in 1972, there were a lot of skyjacking. People would grab an airplane, threaten the pilot, and take it to Cuba. And lots of them. And we introduced those screening, which you are now so familiar with, where before you go into an airplane, just see if you have a weapon or not. The ACLU has said this is the end, this fascism, dictatorship, and so on and so on. Well, we decided that the intrusion is minimal. It delays you for 10 seconds. It does not reveal anything about you other than if you carry a weapon or not. The skyjacking stopped. So by now, nobody, well, next to nobody, anymore fusses about that. It's part of our life. It would be better not to have it. But then you would have weapons and bombs on airplanes. So in this case, we tilted in one direction. On the other hand, when the government authorized torture, we said that is not acceptable. Under no condition, whatever happens, we will have to survive without torture. There we went in the other direction. So, and I can go on, the whole book is full of examples, examining situation by situation by situation, asking when did you go too far in concern about security, and when did you go too far in protecting rights, recognizing that you can fall off the bicycle in both directions. And a good bicycle rider doesn't go too far in one direction, another, but keeps the bicycle going forward.
So we cannot live without one of them, right? We have to live both of them, it's balance each other. So I'm glad you give me the samples. Another conflict is extent of personal information collected by government or corporation civilian system. They are saying they protect citizens or peoples to prevent terrorists. But the question is how much the information they can use. Once the information was collected, I mean, someone could be misused the information not for common good. What do you think? That's how the government should balance this.
Well, this is one of those situations where things really get quite complicated. So let's talk about the phone records, okay? Mm-hmm. So imagine like this, and that has actually happened. Two terrorists attacked the Boston Marathon. They had some more bombs in their car, and they're known to drive to New York. Okay. Now, you're in charge of the FBI. Would you like to know where they may be going, who their friends are in New York, who they recently called? So you would like to have at your fingertips all the phone records, so 2 clicks, and you'll be able to find who are their friends, who are their cooperatives. So from my viewpoint, there's obviously a need to have that data ready. The notion that these records are going to be kept in 7 different phone companies, and if you need to search them, you'd have to go to the lawyers of 7 phone companies, convince them that you have a case, then start searching 7 different databases. I mean, the terrorist is going to be in New York and back before you're going to finish it. On the other hand, as you said, I think correctly, we want to be sure this is not abused. So we need an oversight which makes sure that these records are used only to fight terrorism and not to find out who is your girlfriend dating or so and so. And so I don't think the oversight is enough. And so I suggested that we create a civilian review board of people who will independently examine the use of the records. And again, we can disagree about that. But what's important to me is the way of thinking about it. Instead of me trying to push one direction, one side or the other, as extremely as possible, and either scream this is fascism and so on and so on, or say, if you don't agree with that, then you're undermining our security, you're killing our children. Instead of these extremes, look at it and you see, under certain conditions, it's quite reasonable, especially if there is enough oversight.
Now we go back to your theory. In what degree do you think we should limit individual rights in order to achieve the common good?
You see, when we put it that way, it sounds like individual rights, God written them in his fingers, and they never changed. But think about it for a moment. Until 1965, it's not that long ago, there was no right to privacy at all. Okay, so
That's true.
So the notion that this was there forever, you know, Miranda was introduced even later, you know. So the right, you know, the particular right. Until 1920, the First Amendment, which is our most sacred right to free speech, was not understood at all in the way we understand it today. So rights are interpreted and recalibrated all the time. Sometimes we add, sometimes we change them. So the notion that that is something which cannot be touched is simply completely uninformed.
So in your theory or U.S. Constitution, both give the individual rights and the definition, also the common good definition. So generally, in certain situations, probably we should give up our individual rights for the common good. So that's
We should not give them up.
no, just step down a little bit. Or?
Well, the Constitution is a living document. Here, let me make it very straightforward. The Fourth Amendment says there be no unreasonable search. It doesn't say there be no search. So the question is what is reasonable? What's reasonable changes. If tomorrow terrorists will come with a nuclear weapon, we will allow many more searches, right? Does it mean we gave up our rights? No, the Constitution says there be no unreasonable searches. What is reasonable will change with the circumstances. So no, I'm not talking about giving up rights. I'm just talking about realizing the Constitution always was a living document.
So its Constitution is not a double message. That's protect individual rights, also the common good. So for more information, please read Professor Aksoni's new book, The New Normal, Finding the Balance Between the Individual Rights and the Common Good. Now let's move on to the topic on China. I know you went to China in 2014. Can you talk about a little bit of that?
All right. Well, first of all, I want to invite all of your listeners, all the viewers, to a major meeting. We have at George Washington University, free. It's not a commercial. We're not selling anything. It's open to the public on October 5, the whole day. And we bring in Chinese leaders and American leaders for the purpose of seeing how we can step away from the trend toward conflict and tension. And we very much appreciate your opportunity to tell your many viewers about that. What was the question now?
I'm interested in your view on China. As President Xi will visit U.S. in September, probably South Sea issues will be discussed, and the other security competitions will be discussed as well. So can you give, if Barack Obama administration asks you a piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, it's very important if you recognize that both nations really have very few things on which they differ.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of profound shared interests.
Yeah, probably we have to make another show, so you have very good point, Will, for us. Thank you for joining us. We will wrap up today. Thank you for watching. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.